The day I lost my job, I wore my best navy blue suit. The same suit I had worn for nearly every major milestone of my 30-year career in human resources. Promotions. Industry conferences. The day I received the Manager of the Year award. I had been through dozens of layoff meetings before, on the other side of the table. I had delivered the news, handed out severance packages, and reassured employees that this was just a transition. But I never thought I'd be the one hearing those words. The air in the boardroom was suffocating. The younger executives, the ones I had mentored, avoided eye contact. The CEO cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. He glanced at the stack of termination notices in front of him before finally looking up. "Linda," he began, his voice laced with artificial sympathy, "as part of our restructuring efforts, we've made the difficult decision to." I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew. The room fell into a muted blur, his words blending into a familiar corporate script I had heard too many times before. "We appreciate your contributions, the company's shifting direction, an opportunity for fresh leadership." Fresh. A word that had nothing to do with leadership and everything to do with age. A young HR associate, someone I had once trained, stood up and handed me the manila envelope. "We're really grateful for all you've done," she murmured. I took the envelope, my fingers steady, my expression unreadable. Years of corporate composure didn't crack, not yet. The meeting adjourned. Conversations resumed. The world outside kept moving. But for me? Everything had changed. I walked back to my office, my heels clicking against the polished marble floors with an eerie finality. Inside, my desk sat exactly as I had left it that morning. The Manager of the Year award gleamed under the fluorescent lights. I reached for it, my fingertips tracing the engraved letters. I had worked late nights, weekends, and sacrificed vacations for this company. I had shaped its policies, fought for employee rights, built a department from the ground up. Now, I was a liability. I opened the cardboard box they had given me, the same generic one issued to every departing employee. One by one, I placed my belongings inside. Framed photos. A coffee mug with my initials. Old notebooks filled with strategies to improve retention rates. The last item was my plaque. For years ago, they had called me indispensable. Now, I was excess. A knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. A security guard. "I'll walk you out when you're ready, ma'am." Ma'am. Not Linda. Not Miss Carter. Just another nameless former employee being escorted off the premises. I exhaled slowly, straightened my shoulders, and lifted the box. Out of the office. Out of the career I had spent decades building. Out into a world that suddenly had no place for me. The first few weeks after losing my job felt like an extended silence. No more morning emails. No meetings to prepare for. No purpose pulling me out of bed. At first, I treated it like a vacation, waking up late, catching up on old books, convincing myself that a break was long overdue. But the illusion didn't last. By the second week, reality settled in like an unwelcome guest. I needed a job. And fast. I updated my resume, tailoring it for a modern job market that no longer valued tenure the way it once did. I scoured job postings, sent out applications, and rehearsed answers for questions I had once asked others. The first interview came quickly. A promising role at a growing tech company, led by a team half my age. I sat across from a hiring manager who smiled politely but never really looked me in the eye. "Impressive background," he said, scanning my resume. "But how comfortable are you with AI-driven recruitment tools?" I had anticipated this question. I had trained employees on evolving HR technologies for years. But the moment I responded, confidently, precisely, I saw it. The flicker of doubt in his eyes. The polite nod. The subtle dismissal. "We'll be in touch." They never were. By the fifth interview, the pattern became obvious. By the 10th, it was undeniable. By the 15th, I had memorized the sequence. The courteous greetings. The veiled skepticism. The rejections laced with corporate pleasantries. We're looking for someone who fits our fast-paced, dynamic environment. Translation? You're too old. Bills didn't wait for callbacks. The mortgage was due in 3 weeks. The remaining balance on Lily's student loans loomed over me. I sat at the kitchen table one night, surrounded by stacks of unpaid notices, pretending to read an email I had already opened 3 times. Across from me, Lily poked at her dinner, hesitating before speaking. "Mom, have you thought about retiring?" The words hung in the air like a slap. I looked up, half expecting her to be joking. She wasn't. "Retiring?" I repeated, setting down my fork. She sighed. "I just mean, maybe it's time to enjoy life a little? Sell the house, downsize, travel." She was trying to be kind, but all I heard was, "You should give up." "This isn't about enjoying life, Lily," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "This is about survival." She hesitated. "It's just," she exhaled, choosing her words carefully. "You've been working so hard for so long. Maybe this is a sign to take a step back." I pushed my chair back. "A step back? That's easy for you to say. You have your whole career ahead of you." "So do you," she said, her voice softer now. "But maybe success doesn't have to look the way it used to." I didn't answer. I didn't know how. Because deep down, I wasn't just mourning my job, I was mourning the version of myself I had built over decades. The version that once walked into an office with authority. The version that knew her place in the world. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the interview rejections, the unspoken doubts, Lily's words. Maybe she was right. Maybe success needed a new definition. But I wasn't ready to disappear just yet. A week later, I found myself at the weekend farmers market, not because I needed anything, but because I needed to be anywhere but my house, drowning in unanswered job applications. Stalls lined both sides of the street, filled with fresh produce, handcrafted goods, and small business owners eagerly engaging with passers-by. Then, I saw her. Sandra. She sat behind a makeshift stall, a hesitant smile on her face as she rearranged a few pieces of handmade jewelry. It took me a moment to recognize her. She had been an accounting assistant at my old company. Laid off a few months before me. I hadn't heard from her since. "Sandra?" I said, stepping closer. Her eyes widened, then softened. "Linda. Wow, it's been a while." I glanced at the table. The pieces were delicate, beautifully made, but something was off. No price tags. No branding. No clear signage explaining the story behind the products. "Is this your business?" I asked. She gave a half shrug. "Sort of. A few of us from the company started selling online after we got laid off. Thought we could make it work, but," she sighed, lowering her voice. "We're terrible at it." I studied her face. It wasn't just frustration, it was fear. The same fear that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. The fear of being discarded by a world that no longer saw you as valuable. "You're not terrible," I said, glancing at the stall again. "You just don't know how to sell yourselves." She let out a dry laugh. "And you do?" I opened my mouth, ready to explain that I had spent 3 decades shaping careers, refining resumes, preparing people to step into rooms with confidence. But then it hit me, if I was so good at this, why was I still unemployed? "I used to," I admitted. She hesitated, then said, "We've been trying to get into pop-up markets like this, but we're getting drowned out. People walk by and don't even look at us. We don't know how to stand out." The words lingered in my mind long after I left the market. They had the skills. They had the talent. They just didn't know how to position themselves. And wasn't that exactly what I had spent my entire career doing? That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and a pen. I wasn't thinking about job applications anymore. I was thinking about Sandra, and the hundreds, maybe thousands, of other professionals like us, sitting in their homes, wondering if the world had moved on without them. Then, without overthinking it, I grabbed my phone and hit record. Hi, my name is Linda Carter. I'm 56 years old. I spent 30 years as a hiring manager, coaching professionals on how to build careers. Then, 2 months ago, I got laid off. I've applied to over 20 jobs. 15 interviews. 0 offers. And I know I'm not alone. If you're over 50 and struggling to get hired, let's talk about why. I paused, staring at the screen. Then, I hit post. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few views. Maybe some sympathy comments. Instead, it exploded. By the next morning, the video had over 50,000 views. The comments flooded in. This is exactly my story. I thought I was the only one. Someone needs to fix this system. I had spent weeks waiting for someone to give me permission to start over. But maybe, I didn't need permission. Maybe I just needed to start. The notifications on my phone didn't stop for days. Every time I opened the app, there were more comments, more messages, more people sharing their own stories of being overlooked, discarded, replaced. I wasn't alone. None of us were. Then came the real surprise, a message request from a woman named Tasha Green, a career consultant with over 100,000 followers on LinkedIn. Linda, your video hit a nerve. I run a career coaching platform for mid-career professionals, and I'd love to chat about a collaboration. Your experience is exactly what people need right now. Collaboration. I stared at the word, my mind struggling to process it. 2 weeks ago, I was applying for jobs, practically begging for a chance. Now, someone was reaching out to me. I took a breath, typed a reply, and hit send. That conversation changed everything. Tasha invited me onto her live webinar to talk about ageism in hiring. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't an influencer. I wasn't even employed. Who was I to give advice when I couldn't even land a job myself? But then I thought about all the rejection emails. All the interviews where I was dismissed before I even had a chance. I thought about Sandra, struggling to sell her products at the market. So I said yes. The webinar drew over 3,000 viewers. I spoke candidly about my job search, the coded language of rejection, the way companies prioritized culture fit over decades of expertise. Then, at the end of the session, something unexpected happened. People started asking for my advice. How do I reframe my resume so they don't immediately dismiss me? What do I say when they ask if I can keep up with new technology? Can you review my LinkedIn profile? I answered as many as I could, but there were too many. And that's when Tasha interrupted. Linda, you should be charging for this. I let out a nervous laugh. Who would pay for advice from someone who's unemployed? Tasha smiled. 15 interviews, right? You've already seen behind the curtain of hiring in 2025 more than most people ever will. That makes you an expert. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Because for the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. The next morning, I took 1/10 of my severance check and rented a small room at the public library. I typed up a quick event description and posted it in a few career support groups. Over 50 and struggling to get hired? Let's fix your resume. Let's prep your interviews. Let's make them see what they're missing. Join me for a free workshop, The Ageless Resume, because experience is your biggest asset. I held my breath, waiting for the inevitable silence. Instead, within 3 hours, every seat was booked. This was happening. And this time I wasn't waiting for permission. I was building something of my own. The day of the workshop, I arrived an hour early. The library conference room was small, just a dozen chairs arranged in a semicircle, a whiteboard, and a projector I barely knew how to use. I had spent the night before drafting notes, practicing how I'd introduce myself, and second-guessing every decision that led me here. What if no one showed up? What if they did, and I had nothing useful to offer. I set up my laptop, trying to steady my nerves. Then, at exactly 10 minutes before the start time, the door creaked open. Sandra walked in first. Then a man in his late 50s, wearing a mechanic's uniform. Then a woman with graying curls and reading glasses, clutching a leather-bound notebook like it held the last pieces of her career. By the time I looked up again, every seat was filled. I cleared my throat. First of all, thank you for being here. A few polite nods. Cautious eyes. They weren't sure if I was the real deal or just another person peddling empty promises. I picked up a marker and turned to the whiteboard. Let me tell you something the job market doesn't want you to know. I paused, writing in big, bold letters. Your experience is your power. The room was silent. I turned back to them. They'll tell you it's a liability. They'll ask if you can keep up. They'll treat decades of knowledge like it's something to apologize for. But here's what they won't tell you: businesses don't run on fresh ideas alone. They run on experience. And that is what you bring to the table. A shift. Shoulders straightening. Chins lifting slightly. I spent the next hour walking them through modern hiring algorithms, how AI screening systems discard resumes based on age-related keywords, and how to reframe experience to match what companies claim to be looking for. I showed them how to fight back. The mechanic, whose hands were stained with years of hard work, said, "They told me I don't have digital diagnostic skills." Then we rewrite your resume to highlight problem-solving, adaptability, and technical expertise. You've been fixing engines for decades. Why does learning a software tool make you less qualified? He blinked. Then nodded. The woman with the notebook raised her hand. They keep asking if I can keep up with a fast-paced environment. I smiled. You survived corporate America for 30 years. What's faster than that? Laughter rippled through the room. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one sitting across from someone, justifying my worth. I was teaching others how to reclaim theirs. When the session ended, the mechanic lingered behind. I don't have much, he admitted, reaching into his bag, but I wanted to give you this. He handed me a small, well-worn toolkit. For fixing laptops or something, he said. You helped me fix my career. Least I can do. I stared at it, speechless. This wasn't just gratitude. This was belief. As I packed up my things, I noticed Sandra waiting by the door. She hesitated before speaking. Linda, would you ever consider doing a second session? But, maybe not for free? I blinked. People would pay for this? Sandra smirked. I would. I exhaled, the weight of years of corporate conditioning pressing down on me. I had spent my whole life equating my value with a paycheck someone else signed. But maybe value wasn't something companies assigned to me. Maybe it was something I defined for myself. I picked up my bag, running my fingers over the toolkit, a symbol of what I was starting to build. Then I smiled. Let's find out. Word spread faster than I expected. Within a week, my inbox was flooded with messages. Some from people who had attended my workshop, others from complete strangers who had seen clips of my session posted online. A woman in Chicago wanted to know if I could do a virtual seminar. A laid-off IT manager in Florida asked for help revamping his LinkedIn profile. A former nurse in New York said she was considering switching careers but didn't know how. I wasn't just helping people find jobs. I was helping them reclaim their self-worth. And yet, I still hesitated. Charging for my expertise felt unnatural. I had spent 3 decades inside a system where my salary was determined by a corporation, my value dictated by a title and a paycheck. But that system had discarded me. And I had built something new without it. So, I created a website, Career Reinvention 50+, with Lily's help. We spent a weekend setting up the design, arguing over fonts and colors, debating whether I should put my photo on the homepage. You need to, Lily insisted. People need to see who they're learning from. I stared at my reflection in the mirror later that night. The faint lines around my eyes. The silver streaks I used to dye away every 6 weeks. For the first time, I didn't see them as flaws. The next morning, I posted my first paid consultation offer. Ready to take control of your career? Book a one-on-one session with me. Let's rewrite your future. Within hours, the first booking came in. Then another. And another. It was happening. And then, just as I was starting to believe I had fully broken free from my past, it came back to find me. An email. From Sterling Corp. Subject: Let's reconnect, consulting opportunity. My old company. The same one that had tossed me aside without a second thought. They wanted to talk about a corporate training partnership. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady, my thoughts running in 2 directions at once. Was this an olive branch? A trap? An insult? I closed my laptop and reached for my phone. Lily? Her voice was cautious. Yeah? I took a deep breath. I think I just got my first corporate contract. A pause. Then, a quiet laugh. You're not gonna make it easy on them, are you? I smiled. Not a chance. 1 year later. I stood at the front of a packed conference room, not as an employee, not as an applicant, but as the keynote speaker. Sterling Corp's leadership team sat among the audience, executives in expensive suits, the same people who once decided I was disposable. Now, they were paying me to teach them how to keep employees like me from walking away. I scanned the crowd, let the moment settle. Then, I picked up the mic and began. 1 year ago, this company decided I was no longer needed. A ripple of murmurs. Today, they've invited me back. Not because I changed. But because the world is finally realizing what they've been losing. Applause. Loud. Real. For the first time, I wasn't just proving myself to them. They were proving themselves to me. That night, as I scrolled through my phone, I saw a tweet going viral. My tweet. The job market needs to stop filtering resumes by birth year and start filtering them by wisdom. Over 100,000 shares. Thousands of comments. People like me, sharing their stories. Their struggles. Their triumphs. I glanced at my bookshelf. Next to my old Manager of the Year plaque was a new framed certificate. Not an award. Not corporate recognition. A handwritten thank you letter from the first group of students I ever taught. The ones who had started over. Just like I had. And that? That meant more than any title ever could. This story isn't just about one woman's journey, it's about reinvention, resilience, and reclaiming your worth in a world that too often decides when you're no longer valuable. Linda's experience reflects a harsh reality: the job market favors the young, dismisses experience, and treats age like a disadvantage. But what if the real disadvantage is a system that refuses to see the power of wisdom, leadership, and lived experience? Linda didn't wait for permission to start over, she created her own path. She turned rejection into opportunity, not just for herself, but for thousands of others who had been cast aside. And in the end? The very company that once discarded her had to recognize her value on her terms. So now, we want to hear from you. Speech Balloon, what do you think about Linda's story? Do you believe experience is an advantage, or do you think the job market is justified in prioritizing younger workers? What would you have done in Linda's position? Comment 2 if you loved this story and 7 if you didn't. Let us know your thoughts, we read every comment. And if you enjoy real-life stories of resilience, second chances, and powerful transformations, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to EN True Tales with Natalie as your storyteller. We bring you new, inspiring videos every day, stories that might just change the way you see the world. See you in the next one.